Yesterday, I saw a big influential pastor share something about how people in recovery for addiction shouldn't call themselves alcoholics and addicts anymore. And my name's Trisha. I'm an alcoholic. And as a resident expert on the matter, I'd like to weigh in. I have been kept sober, since 2011. Through God's infinite grace. I mark myself a Christian first and foremost before everything else in my life. And I want to tell you why I also call myself an alcoholic. So first, let me just debunk the whole you're no longer an alcoholic and you're no longer an addict. You're a child of God. Yes, I am a child of God. Yes, I am a Christian. That is what I am. But I also call myself a mom. I call myself a wife. I call myself, insert political party here. I'm not going to tell you, but I do call myself it. I call myself a lot of things that I am. I don't call myself those things above being a believer because they're not more important than that, but we can have multiple titles. Additionally, the ignorance and arrogance that it takes to weigh in on a topic that you know so little about, and I know this guy knows little about it because I listened to his sermon, and I gotta tell you, a holy anger came up in me, because had he known anything about the experience of being an alcoholic and an addict, an experience that I know very well, he would have known that actually somebody saying I am an alcoholic and I am an addict is the very first miracle. Because how many times did I tell myself, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic. I didn't drink that much. I didn't screw things up that much. It's not that bad. I'm not an alcoholic. I could stop if I want to. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not as bad as that guy. He's an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic. The moment somebody says, I am an alcoholic, I am an addict, all of heaven rejoices, because the devil had long been in that person's ear telling them that they weren't. In addition to their own voice and their own thoughts telling them that they weren't, so many of us have struggled with slithering, sneaking, low down, no good friends who, when we did finally say, oh, maybe I do have a problem, in come those slithering friends saying, you don't have a problem. You're not an alcoholic. Come drink with me. You're not that bad. I know that at the end of my drinking, those were the only friends I had left. You're not that bad. Come on. I know you're trying to get sober. I just cracked open my first beer. Aren't you so jealous? You're not an alcoholic. Don't tell somebody in recovery for addiction what they are not, because that is the lie from the pit of hell that they had heard so many times before. Next, I would like to address the fact that if I'm not an alcoholic, then why is me being sober today any sort of miracle? God has removed the chains of addiction in my life. He has removed the obsession for alcohol. I don't crave it. I don't want it. I don't need it. I really don't think about it unless I see some guy on the internet talking nonsense like this guy was. If I'm not an alcoholic, though, then me being sober right now is no big deal. This isn't a miracle because I'm not an alcoholic anymore, right? And further to that point, because I'm an alcoholic, and this is how the mind of an alcoholic works, is, well, if I'm not an alcoholic anymore, then I can drink like a normal person, right? I've been sober since 2011. My life is completely different now. I can have just a little bit, right? Because I'm not an alcoholic anymore. I am an alcoholic. I am a sober alcoholic. So there's like two miracles. The first is that I was one of the few, the precious living few who are able to utter the phrase, I am an alcoholic, because addiction takes out so many of us, the majority of us, before we ever get to that point. So yes, I am an alcoholic. And then compounding on that miracle of me admitting that I'm an alcoholic is the fact that I am a sober alcoholic. I can't even count the miracles that I've received in my life. I am a sober alcoholic mom. I'm a sober alcoholic wife. I'm a sober alcoholic volunteer in my community. Whatever it is, it begins by admitting that we are an alcoholic or an addict. we then receive an additional blessing and miracle by being maintained in sobriety. But if I'm not an alcoholic, then today is not a miracle. And believe me, if you knew who I used to be, you would know today is a miracle. And I have only him to thank for it. And just because I call myself an alcoholic doesn't mean that I am not so many more things in my life, and that I am not the most important thing in my life, which is a Christian. And further, my final point is just because somebody has a large platform does not mean that they always know what they are talking about. And if somebody with such a big platform wants to weigh in on something that they have clearly spent so little time learning about from those of us with direct experience, might I kindly suggest that you keep your mouth shut, because your bad, terrible, awful advice might just be killing people. Because this is not cute. This is not lighthearted. Most people with addiction die. Bottom line. Most people who struggle with alcoholism and drug addiction die as a result of their addiction. Please do not come in from your high horse with no experience and a lot of opinions and tell us how it is done. I say that with love, with the love of Jesus, but I needed to flip a few tables there because it got me a little upset.